Hi, and welcome to another Spotlight on UNBC program. We hope you have enjoyed the first two programs, and stay tuned for this, the third in our monthly progress reports on the University of Northern British Columbia. Over the next half hour, we'll update you on the progress being made to build the library collection. We'll take you to a luncheon in honor of National Social Work Week, and we'll start a new staff profile feature. My name is Rob Van Addercombe, and I'll be your host for the next half hour, and that's just a hint of what's coming up on Spotlight on UNBC.
Spotlight on UNBC with your host, Rob Van Addercombe.
Construction of the Prince George campus is continuing, as you can see by the progress being made on the Laboratory Research Center. This campus won't officially open until September of 1994, but preparations are being made now for opening day, such as the buying of specialized lab equipment, which often has to be ordered years in advance. Another example is the library. This building is scheduled for a substantial completion in the spring of 1994. But that does not mean library staff will be going on a book buying binge that summer. The process of building the library collection has already begun in a former warehouse located at the foot of Cranbrook Hill. The temporary UNBC library has in fact been set up in what used to be a bingo hall, but instead of rows of tables, rows of shelves now fill the room. Over the past year, finding a temporary location and hiring staff were both emphasized, but University librarian Pat Appavoo says building the collection has been the top priority.
On one side, we have contracts with a couple of what are known as book vendors to bring in up to about 60,000 volumes of materials into the library. And those materials will be identified using a profile, what we call an academic profile, based on our proposed academic plan. And there's a constant dialogue between ourselves and the vendors about the type of material we want and that sort of thing. So we will be acquiring a lot of material that way, and the vendors will be doing a lot of what is known as the processing, the cataloging, the putting the call numbers on, the security strips and things like that.
Making them aware of our academic plan.
Yes.
I guess it ensures that we don't get hundreds of books on the biology of the Indian Ocean, but on the one hand, we might get a lot focusing on what's happening in northern BC.
Yes, exactly. And that profile identifies the areas that are especially of interest to us, which is Northern Studies, Native First Nation Studies, Circumpolar, Pacific Rim. So when we develop the profile, we identify those areas. We also, on that profile, indicate that we do not want a collection that is too heavily weighted to advanced research materials. We're looking for a broad-based undergraduate collection.
The library has been open to students since classes began in September '92, and what isn't on the shelf can be obtained through interlibrary loan.
The response has been very good. They really appreciate us being here. I don't think they were anticipating the library being up and running to the extent that it is. And we've really made an effort to let them know that we're around and that they can come in and use the facility. We have study space for about 20 students to come in, and so it's been good.
The library staff have a long way to go before full operations begin in 1994, but they recently reached a milestone with the cataloging of book number 10,000.
9,995, 9,996, 9,997, 9,998, 9,999, 10,000.
We reached that 10,000 mark, and was it a nice milestone?
It was a wonderful feeling. I can't speak for the rest of the staff, but it was a real milestone for me. You have to remember that when we came into this building in May, there was nothing. There were no shelves up. There were no books. So to get to the 10,000 point, it was a big deal for us, and I'm really proud of what we've done, and it was really exciting.
The original document that was put together about the university academic plan came from the president's office, and in there he identifies the library as being central to the academic program at the university. And that's one of the reasons I was very interested in coming here, because I felt that's the way a university should go. A university needs to know that its library is important to the academic program.
Does that put more pressure on you too? In the sense of trying to build something from scratch?
Yes, in a way, because in a sense, you know you're not building just for today or tomorrow or the next day. You're building the base on which the whole collection over the next 20, 25 years will rest. And yes, that's an important issue. But the other part of it is to make sure that the collection also is really relevant to the needs of students.
Most communities in northern BC are located either next to a river or next to a lake. Prince Rupert, on the other hand, is located next to the largest lake on Earth, the Pacific Ocean. And that location lends itself well to programs and research in maritime studies. Several UNBC officials recently attended a workshop in Prince Rupert on that topic, including UNBC's Dean of Research and Graduate Studies, Bill Morrison.
I guess my main impression was the extreme energy that you find in the Prince Rupert region. I mean, we weren't going out there to urge people to do things. They were the ones who got us to come out and are very anxious for us to get going on this, which we are now doing. So that the enthusiasm and the energy and the desire to work on the issues that confront that region are very evident. I think that's what impressed me most of all. There are problems in Prince Rupert which cry out to be studied, and this is one of the things that we were talking about in the forum a couple of weeks ago held in Prince Rupert, the things that really need working on, such as the fisheries, which was one of the examples given, the abalone fisheries, which have been fished practically out of existence without any research being done on them at all. And this is the kind of problem, economic problem, social problem, regional problem that this proposed institute would address.
Is that an example then of where research is very obvious and a clear benefit in areas like that where it's a direct tie to their whole economy?
Yeah, it's an excellent example of this. It's what we often call applied research, which means research that has an obvious practical benefit, as opposed to pure research, which might not have any obvious practical benefit. There's nothing wrong with applied research. It's not any worse than pure research. It's simply different. But it does have an obvious practical use. And this is the kind of thing that the center, the proposed center, would be doing, as well as more purely scientific work.
Will UNBC have more focus towards the applied side of research, since this area has been pretty neglected, I would think, in the past in terms of research done here?
I don't think you can tell researchers what to do. I mean, if we hire a physicist who's interested in quarks or little bits of matter, this physicist would go ahead and pursue his or her objectives. But we are very interested in applied research, because I think the days when the public is willing to pour millions of dollars into an ivory tower without seeing anything coming out at the other end, these days are probably over. So although we're not going to say you have to do this and you have to do that, you can't do that to scholars. We are very interested in this, and I think the people we've been interviewing and hiring are interested too. So the answer to your question is there's going to be a lot of it done.
This edition of Spotlight on UNBC is marking the debut of a new staff profile feature. But with 90 employees now on staff, it was difficult to select which employee to interview first. But who's the first person you see when you visit, and who's the first you hear when you call? Well, that person is the receptionist. Bruno, do you get a lot of comments from people who are surprised to see or hear a male receptionist instead of a female one?
Oh yes, oh yes. People often, I think due to stereotyping, assume that there will be a female receptionist either present or answering the phone, and so oftentimes many people will, you'll notice people pause before they ask for what they want, and it's actually, it can be quite humorous at times.
Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of working here, it must be difficult at times to figure out who's who and who's where and who's does what, with new people starting all the time. We're at 90 right now.
Oh yes, it can be very difficult at times. I'll never forget my first couple of days when I first started here. Just being overwhelmed with first off a new switchboard, then at the same time trying to learn all the names, everything from the janitor to the president. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes I found myself getting names mixed up, but now I think I've got them down pretty good.
Yeah. Now, how many calls would you say you get per day on average?
Per day on average, I'd say we are at about between 200 to 300 calls a day. And
what are some of the common questions?
The most common types of questions at this point are A, when are we opening, to what types of courses are we going to be offering? Are we going to be offering any before we're actually open, or that type of thing.
Oh, cut off by the bell. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Good afternoon, University of Northern BC.
Many students know what a hassle it is to apply to different colleges and universities each year hoping to get accepted. Well, that problem might not exist in future years if BC adopts a central application system. Such a program has been in place in Great Britain for several years, and the head of the British Universities and Colleges Central Application System was in Prince George recently to talk with UNBC's Director of Communications, Clive Keane, at the Fort George Regional Museum.
A central application system brings considerable advantages to potential students. I think most fundamentally it brings together the list of all courses and programs available right throughout the province, so that people are aware of the opportunities available to them, which they might not normally have thought of if they'd only thought possibly of going to their local institution. And a second real advantage is that it imposes a discipline on the institutions, who must then all operate the same rules, so that when a student applies, he or she knows that decisions are going to be made at the same time of the year for every institution, and they're not necessarily being played off by one institution against another. Our system has served really to promote post-secondary higher education, and we seem now to be getting many more students into post-secondary education than we did before. You can only be a gainer if you have such a system.
I heard it said the other day that before you set up your central application system, about 12 to 14% of young people were going into higher education, and now it's gone up in the UK to around 30%. Do you think you're partly responsible for that?
Yes, we are. We're only partly responsible, not wholly so, because it's the quality of the higher education that attracts students, of course. But just the simple process of making people aware of what's available makes them realise that they could possibly gain certain study skills or professional skills or work skills through going up to university or college. And so many more try to access it now, and you're right, the rate is now up to 33% and still rising.
Tony, many thanks.
Thank you.
The academic hiring process mentioned on Spotlight on UNBC last month is continuing, but several positions have already been filled, such as the new program chair of social work. His first public presentation since being appointed was made in March during National Social Work Week.
While it is too early to say what the School of Social Work at UNBC will look like, it is clear that we can't simply transplant a program from other southern institutions and expect it to work here in northern central BC. Like other schools, social work at UNBC will strive to develop a reputation of scholarship, good research, and expertise in social work education. Like other schools of social work, we will, as mandated by our accrediting body and our code of ethics, design a professional program that advocates for justice and equality and attempts to equip graduates with the intellectual and practical and professional skills needed to promote beneficial change. But in addition, the program here will need to reflect the community and I believe the way global and national policies play themselves out and affect the well-being of those that live and work here. I am glad today's event is a joint endeavor sponsored by the Northern Branch of the British Columbia Association of Social Workers and UNBC. This type of collaboration is important and necessary, and I hope it is a sign of things to come. It is my view that to gain the confidence of the people that live and work in this region, the School of Social Work at UNBC must have a strong community base. This means that it will need to know and address the concerns of the community. It will need to link up with local people who know from experience what community needs and community building are all about. It will need to work together with social workers and human service agencies that understand the issues facing workers in the field practice aspect of their work. And it will need to design a program of studies that reflects the continuing education concerns of human service workers that practice in this area.
UNBC's Dean of Health and Human Sciences, David Fish, also spoke at the luncheon, outlining the goals of the faculty, which will include not only social work, but education, psychology, and nursing.
I have been told that this particular faculty that I now represent is really the faculty for pain and suffering. And I think you're all aware of your own backgrounds, if you have been to universities, that schools of social work are somewhat peripheral to the major activities of the university. But let me say this, at UNBC, it is my intention that this faculty will be the flagship faculty of the university, because I'm firmly convinced that we need to develop the human resources in the region as well as the natural resources. And in the recruitment efforts that we've made to date, we've been very successful in every field for which I'm responsible in being able to identify leaders in the education field for each of the professions that come within the faculty.
The first Spotlight on UNBC program featured a story on the tendering of Phase 2 of the main buildings on the Prince George campus. 5 companies bid for that project, with the bids ranging in price from a low of just over $58 million to a high of $66.5 million. Even the low bidder came in at higher than what UNBC had expected, so various ways of saving money from the capital budget have been examined. The contract will have been awarded after this show was produced, so we'll have more details next month. Raising money has been the job of UNBC's Development Office, which is working towards the establishment of endowed scholarships and bursaries. The goal of the campaign is $10 million, and the office reached a milestone recently, with the $1 million mark having just been reached.
I mean, it lends a whole air of credibility to the whole process. I mean, this is a very ambitious undertaking. If you talk to the development officers of the other 3 universities in BC, they're not sure that this is, or certainly 3 or 4 months ago, they were questioning our sanity. But clearly, having no students, having no alumni, having very little track record, etc., etc. So we had the odds stacked against us, but we've demonstrated to ourselves, we hope the institution and hopefully the general public, that this campaign is for real.
The Development Office currently has a staff of 6, but the campaign has been largely driven by the efforts of volunteers, who will continue to play a large role.
We now have to sort of move out from Prince George a little bit. Clearly, before one can fundraise down in the Lower Mainland or out on the coast, one has to demonstrate support at home before we can expect other people to support it. And I think we've demonstrated that that strong support is here. What we were intending to do with the community campaigns is to get the communities, in fact, to run their own campaign in support of initiatives that meet the community priority and the university priority. And we really would like to take a role of supporting that community initiative. We don't want to sort of try and run it from Prince George. We want the community to get enthusiastic and pick it up. And at this stage, we're looking at generating or supporting the setting up of community committees in Fort St. John, Chetwynd, Valemont, Quesnel, and possibly Terrace.
The Northwest region is closer to having a regional coordinator. Interviews were conducted in February and March with 3 candidates, and part of their interviews required they give public talks on the role of universities in community life. The regional coordinator will be the university's eyes and ears in the region, meeting with local governments, stakeholders, advisory groups, and college officials. A regional coordinator has already been appointed for the Peace River region. Interviews have also been continuing for academic candidates. The month of March featured candidates for positions in the Faculty of Management and Administration. The academic candidates, like the candidates for a regional coordinator, give public talks as part of their interviews, and recent lectures have been heard from economics, business administration, political science and public administration, and international studies candidates.
A number of obstacles we confront when we come into the classroom or we come into a discussion where we're asked to speak about Pacific affairs, and it has to do with the way that our audience or those we are dealing with think about international relations. The mental maps that we carry around are one of the first obstacles that we have to confront. Typically, these tend to be Eurocentric maps.
A telecommunications revolution brought by the cable TV and the fax machine, the VCR and the computer modem, has rendered the very idea of totalitarian rule obsolete. If true, Canada can help democratic norms take root in this time of turbulent transition by supporting a liberal policy regarding knowledge, information, and technology flows. This is also why we should embrace a global economy despite the painful adjustments that are called for.
Fort St. John hosted a conference on regional economic development co-sponsored by UNBC and BC Hydro at the end of March. The 2-day workshop was UNBC's first in the Northeast region and included delegates from throughout the Peace region, such as mayors, Chamber of Commerce reps, industry, and environmental groups. A report on the conference will appear on the next Spotlight on UNBC coming up next month. Events in the university's development are detailed on a new poster illustrating UNBC progress. The poster will be sent to schools, libraries, chambers of commerce, elected officials, and various other locations. For information on public activities and events and the updated academic lecture schedule, call the info line at 565-5678. You've no doubt heard about the Rhodes Scholarship Program. It's known around the world for honoring the top undergraduate students. You may not, however, have heard about the Fulbright Program. It's a lot less well known, but no less distinguished. It honors the top graduate students and faculty members. UNBC has been selected to be the host institution for 1 Fulbright Scholar this year, one of only 6 American faculty members to come to Canada in 1993, sponsored by the Fulbright Program.
We select the best, the brightest people that we can possibly get, and those are the ones we want involved in these exchange programs. This institution has set itself forward as an institution interested in northern affairs, in the study of environment, in the study of native peoples. It's interested in international relationships, particularly with the United States. And I think these are certainly facets of scholarly endeavor that will be of great interest to the Fulbright program.
They are of interest to Dr. Jack August from the University of Houston, who will be coming to UNBC for 1 academic year to do research and teach courses on environmental history.
Yeah, almost 200,000 scholars worldwide that have participated in the Fulbright program, including prime ministers of countries, including Supreme Court justices, including people who've won Nobel Prizes later on in their careers. It's a very high-powered group of people who make a difference, leaders.
And now including Professor August.
Yes, yes indeed.
The arrival of the Fulbright Scholar will not be a rare occasion at UNBC. The university's Director of International Studies says a strong program of both faculty and student exchanges will be developed.
Right. We've been really focusing on our 2 regional areas in international studies, the Circumpolar North and the Pacific Rim. Thus far, we've signed a series of agreements with Scandinavian universities in both Sweden and Finland. And we're hoping to also add to that some connections with Russia, which is very topical at the present moment. In addition to these, we've been visiting in Australia and New Zealand, signing agreements with those institutions in Waikato University in New Zealand and the University of Tasmania in Australia. And then later this spring, we're going to be signing agreements with institutions in Japan. So we're starting to build the full rim of the Pacific Rim into our plans. One of the things that we're trying to do, of course, is make this truly reciprocal. That it's not simply a matter of bringing international people into Prince George and the other northern regions of northern British Columbia, but also having an opportunity for our students and our faculty to go abroad. We're in fact trying to depart a little bit from the standard Canadian practice of simply looking at international exchanges as a one-way flow of international people coming in. We're hoping that equal numbers of Canadians will go abroad. My suspicion is that anywhere between maybe 10 to 15% of the faculty that we'll have on board any particular year will be from abroad. Similar, not quite as high in terms of international student numbers. My guess is maybe somewhere between 5 and 7% of the students coming to UNBC will be international students. And we're hoping that those numbers will be equally distributed across all academic programs.
Is it unusual for a university to have a large faculty and student exchange program in place?
In North America, up until recently, it has been unusual. Only the very elite universities of the East Coast, in the States particularly, have had these types of programs. But what you're starting to see is a whole movement in this area, both in Canada and in the States, to try and make this a normal part of the experience of faculty members and both undergraduate students and graduate students.
How does it help the learning experience?
Well, partly because these students, let's take it from the student perspective first of all, are realizing they're part of a broader community. While the students live in northern British Columbia, their careers and their life objectives are going to be linked inevitably to events taking place abroad, whether they're in the area of forestry or the area of business or in some of the liberal arts. Those external events are going to have a consequence. Also, their careers are going to involve knowledge of the outside community. And so it's important they have that as part of their undergraduate experience.
Thank you for tuning in to Spotlight on UNBC. It's obvious this campus is really coming along, and next month we'll take you on a guided tour. Until then, I'm Rob Van Addercombe, and thanks again for tuning in to Spotlight on UNBC.